Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm Wake, your host for Shaman to Shaman. You've joined a series of heartfelt conversations where we connect shaman to shaman, healer to healer, teacher to teacher, with earth and lineage-based seekers and practitioners from around the world. Today, I'm honored to welcome a deep spiritual guide and master, Alan Waugh, joining us from Mount Shasta. Alan will be sharing stories from his powerful journey of spirit and the unique ways he and his wife Diana bring their gifts to the world. Alan is a globally recognized healer and Shipibo trained ayahuasca ceremonial leader, sourcing primarily from their Sacred Valley Spiritual Retreat facility in Vilcabamba, Ecuador. We're honored to have Alan Waugh with us today. Hello, Alan. Welcome to Shaman to Shaman.
Hi, Wake. Thanks very much for having me on.
Is there anything else you'd like to say as a welcome or greetings before I tell a little bit more about you to our audience?
Just it's an honor to be here and chat with you and divulge anything that might help your listeners and on Shaman. And I'm sort of been on Shamans Directory for a while, and I'm really encouraged by what they're doing and the sort of the outreach that's happening in the world, and particularly because I had a chat with Trisha Mayumi. That you want to kind of like weed out the what I call the weekend shamans, and sort of like get a bit more serious.
Well, you're weeded in, so
Thank you.
fully a member of Shamans Directory. We're happy to have your contributions, and this is an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. Originally from London, Alan turned a decade of depression into a journey of transformation, a very personal journey, which I hope Alan will tell us about today. Traveling through Asia, Africa, and South America, immersing himself in ancient wisdom traditions, meeting remarkable people along the way, and freeing himself fully from his depression. Alan's healing path continued in the Shipibo ayahuasca tradition, and over the years, he's also trained with master teachers like Michael Harner and Don Oscar Miro-Quesada. He's the author of the best-selling book, Alchemical Ayahuasca, Take the Journey from Depression to the Sweet Spot. And Alan will be sharing some wisdom from his volume. Alan volunteered for 2 decades with the Zen Hospice Project in San Francisco, sitting one by one with hundreds of people in their final days. And this experience has made a profound impact on his work. Today, Alan and his wife Diana share their healing work, training, and plant ceremonies from their retreat center in Ecuador, and also offer sessions online for people all over the world. We hope that the stories Alan shares today will resonate with you and perhaps spark something new on your own path. As with all our Shamans Directory offerings, that you will feel inspired to bring more shamanic wisdom and healing into your life. Shaman to Shaman is brought to you by Shamans Directory, a dynamic online platform where earth and lineage-based shamans share their medicine, build community, and help change the world. Visit us at shamansdirectory.com, on YouTube and Instagram. So now I am truly honored to welcome Alan Waugh to introduce himself to our global shamanic community. Alan, how would you like to begin?
Well, yeah, you said a lot about my path, or how I came to be on this path. But I'll introduce how I really did walk the path of shamanism, and I was depressed in my teens and for a lot of my 20s. So I reverted to a lot of things that people that are have those sort of negative mind states do, which is take drugs and drink alcohol and try to numb it out. And but one of the substances that I used quite a lot was LSD, and what that did for me is it introduced me to a whole different way of perceiving my reality. It sort of expanded, as mystical experiences can, expanded my awareness to see that there was a world beyond but that which I had perceived. So at some point it was helpful, but another time, after a lot of use of it, it actually took me deeper into my inner world that wasn't a happy one. So it kind of diverted to the negative parts of myself, and it made me probably more depressed, unfortunately. But one of the things is that it showed me that the mind is much more expansive than I had been told in my Catholic upbringing. You know, that there is a true God that is not the one that was painted for me in my Christian um, ancestry. And so I started to explore that, and I would sort of do what I thought was meditation, and it was I would go off into the cosmos. I would just like randomly sort of go off, but it was always actually self-directed. I could do it at will, and I would go off into these mind states and explore much more expanded sort of universe than I was living in my 3D world. And so I did that sort of very regularly. It was kind of an escape for me. It was very blissful, and I just thought it was meditation. It's only I think when I came to San Francisco when I was 30, that I found somebody that I talked about it, and they said, "Oh no, that's shamanic journey." And so when I found out that it wasn't sort of meditation, the typical meditation that everybody else was doing, I started exploring the shamanic world, and so that's when I came across Michael Harner, and I studied with Hank Wesselman as well, that did the more traditional core shamanic practices. So that was in the sort of mid to late 90s where I started to officially training in shamanic worldview and practices.
Well, even before that, Alan, didn't you have a profound experience where you heard a voice
Yeah,
telling you, in essence, that something
yeah.
needs to change?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was in London. I was very depressed. I was suicidally depressed, and I sort of idealised my own demise many times since I was about 16. And I was at 28. I decided, okay, enough's enough, and I was ready to end it all. And I was sitting on the floor of my apartment where I lived alone in South London, and I was that. This is the day, This is the day. Sort of waves of depression sweeping over me, and then I heard a voice, and the voice said, "Do you want to live or do you want to die?" And I was like, "Well, who's that?" And I just said, I want to die, obviously, why are you even asking me that? And he said again, do you want to live or do you want to die? But this time he said it with a different sort of emphasis, and it took me deeper, and he showed me actually how to go deeper into that, the true answer of what he was asking me. And he showed me how to connect with my heart rather than my head. And being depressed, I was always in my head, and really obsessed with my depression. And he showed me how to get out of my head and to actually explore my heart center, which I hadn't really ever done before. And in that soft, gentle connection to myself and relationship to myself, I said, "Well, I want to live, but I don't know how to live. I don't know how to do it." And he said, "Well, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you how to do that." And that was my introduction to a Mantane, who has been, uh, valued, highly valued advisor counsel since that time. Who's guided me on many deep journeys,
Well,
not just inside myself, but in the world. Mm-hmm.
in your book, Alan, you describe a Montani. Could you give us a word picture?
Yeah. So for many years, Amantane was a voice. There was no image for Amantane. Very kind, very benevolent. I trusted him because he showed me how to live and how to be happy. And it's only when I started drinking ayahuasca that there was a visual for him. And he is a Native American chief. He was bare chested with just like a leather loincloth thong type um, dress, and he had feathers, feather crown. But he met me on a path. It was a mountain path. This is the first time I met him. He met me on a mountain path, and he said, "Come with me." And I came with him up the mountain path into a cave, and in the cave there were some other elders. They were all male. They were all dressed similarly as him, and they were standing around a fire. And he introduced me to each one of them, and he said, "We will be your council." And I was invited actually to jump into the fire, and in that fire I received some sort of initiation to that wisdom, and guided that ayahuasca was to be my future path.
How amazing that you have made deep relationship with a trusted spirit guide and the council, as you say.
Yeah,
That's quite the core of Michael Harner's work, this journey skill that you have.
yeah.
Could you tell us more about that?
Well, in a way, I was trained with LSD. I could spontaneously, and the term that Michael Harner would use would be at will. You at will can enter these journey states, and you can at will exit these journey states. And I could do that. I could spontaneously enter these non-ordinary reality states. Uh, and sometimes it was just like a little bit of a pleasure trip, until I started officially training in shamanism to realize that it's much more powerful if you go in with a particular reason or particular question to access these realms. And so I actually found it very, very easy to do that, because I'd sort of in a way self-trained at it. But then what it showed, because I was also a Buddhist practitioner, I'd done a lot of meditation practices. I found that when I included the journeying practices with the meditation, I could have these like very powerful experiences with a lot of the Buddhist deities, like in the Vajrayana tradition. There's the samadhi practices where you meditate on a particular deity, like Vajrapani or Manjushri or Tara, etc. And I could, in a way, engage with them, because I had the ability to enter those non-ordinary states that isn't typical of Buddhist meditation. So it was a beautiful thing. I could just go off on journeys and explore the wisdom contained within the Buddhist teachings as well.
Well, one thing, Alan, that really strikes me is how courageous you have been on your journey. That even before meeting your teachers, you went on a grand pilgrimage
Yeah,
for quite an extended period of time, left
yeah,
everything in London
yeah.
and went traveling in Asia and beyond.
Mhm.
Uh, could you tell a little bit about how that commitment to journey
Yeah,
and pilgrimage has really changed your life?
yeah. So Amantane, when I first had that, I guess, conversation with Amantane, he said, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to tell you what you have to do to exit those negative mental states that are causing you to be so depressed and want to end your life. And he said, first of all, you've got to leave England. You're going to leave England for 18 months. Now I know it was the hero's journey. I didn't know about the hero's journey at that point. And you're going to leave for 18 months, and you're going to meet other spiritual seekers. You're going to, meet people, have conversation, be inspired, be guided to follow a particular direction. And I just said yes, and that's something I'd never done. I'd really not left England much, just to maybe go to Ireland, where my mother's family lived. But it was massive for me. It was a massive thing, and I had a business. I was earning a lot of money. I was like physically comfortable, and had a family that I loved, and so I had to give it up. I had to step out into the unknown, and I said yes, and I pretty much said yes to him every time since then. When he's guided me on big things, and so I bought a ticket. Well, it's like a rail ticket around Europe that ended up in India. I chose India. I knew, I was surrounded. A lot of people, a lot of Indians lived around me in the area of London where I lived in South London, and so I knew that they were probably the most spiritual people, that I had been exposed to, in terms of what I knew about the traditions, and I'd started reading a bit about Hinduism. So I knew it was going to be India and that part of the world. And that was my choice, and I had fantastic adventures. I did that journey for 18 months, and then pretty soon after that, I decided to go to South America and for a year, and Africa after that. So it was a journey of about three years, and I went back to England a little bit in between those journeys to earn money to carry on with my adventures. And so yeah, met some incredible people. I didn't get into shamanism. I was into shamanism the first time I went to Peru, but I went back following that and got more into those traditions, and was introduced to ayahuasca.
Well, what impresses me, Alan, is your commitment to personal growth, because I remember reading that you made a list of habits that you had and behaviors that you wanted to change and aspirations you wanted to achieve. And so, in addition to the shamanic support, I just want to highlight this part of you who is a born seeker or whose seeking was awakened, and how you have steadfastly pursued your own journey of personal growth.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things in that journey, when I've been in India for about a month, I took a photograph of myself, and I had it developed. It was back in the day when you had to develop photographs. And I saw myself. I saw an image of myself, and I saw like the images behind me, or several images of myself. The images behind me were different, with monkeys and temples and things like that. But the person looking back at me was the same, and I thought, oh, shit, nothing has changed. What do I do? What do I do? And I sort of felt a moment of panic, and the Mantane at that point said, I'm going to show you what you need to do. And he guided me to go to an Indian village, a small Indian village, for a period of 3 months. And he said, you're just going to be there, and you're going to be with yourself, and you're going to look at yourself, and you're going to work out what you need to do to let go of these states, to let go of this diminished view that you have of yourself. So I did. I immediately found an Indian village in Kashmir. I met somebody on a bus who told me where he lived. I said, that sounds perfect. An Indian village by the side of a lake. So I went. He took me to a family that had a room above a cattle shed, and I agreed a low rent. And I stayed in that cattle shed for 3 months, or above that cattle shed for 3 months, and I figured out what I needed to do. Started meditating. I hadn't been meditating, but I was doing my own version of shamanic journeying, and I started journaling, which I'd never done before, and making a list of what I needed to do to improve myself. So that 3 months was probably the most critical thing that I did on that whole 18-month journey, because I was with myself. I was, just surrounded by Indians. Fortunately, some of them could speak English, and I started learning Kashmiri. I spent hours every day learning Kashmiri, trying to understand their Muslim culture, making friends with them. Being in a little way being part of the family that I was staying with. This was like so off the charts for me. I was even wearing the clothes that they wore. It was just like a complete transformation in so many different ways that I had. A year before, I just would have said, you're crazy. No way would I be doing this in a year. And it's just the big shifts that I was willing to take. I was so proud of myself. For the first time in my life, I was like, good job, man. I'm so proud of what you're doing. And so I was encouraged to carry on, and had some incredible adventures, met some amazing people, and would see the devoted way that people would practice their spirituality, and it felt really authentic and deep and transformative. And I went to Tibet as part of that journey, and was deeply moved by the Tibetans and their commitment. And even though they were living in such challenging conditions, because after the invasion of the Chinese, they were the most loving people I've ever met in my life. And so that had a huge influence on me. And it was meeting people that had the biggest impact on my life. But meeting myself more so was what was the big transformation.
Another part of your life, Alan, that I think is worth emphasizing is your 20-year commitment to hospice work. When you moved to San Francisco, you volunteered, as I understand it, to hold space and hold the hands of many, many people in their final days. And I feel
yeah,
that has formed you or sharpened you in a certain way. Could you tell us about that?
yeah. So yeah, when I arrived in San Francisco, I started working. I was a general contractor, carpenter, and I started working for a man who's now dead, unfortunately, Ron. And he's a gay guy, and the work I was doing is in the Castro district, which is the gay area of San Francisco. And I became really good friends with that community, and a lot of them were dying because it was like the height of the AIDS epidemic. And I really loved these friends of mine, and I wanted to give back. And I was living with a guy who was really close to death, and he became a really good friend. And I just wanted to give back to him and to the community that had welcomed me, and so openly. And I found out about the hospice. I was also, as I mentioned, a Buddhist practitioner. So the fact that it was the Zen hospice really attracted me to it, to this work and that organisation. And so I trained and I started volunteering, and it blew me away. I'd never been in a way that level of intimacy when somebody's dying is the deepest intimacy that you can have. With somebody you don't know. Just a lot of the people that I was working with were from the homeless community. Working with street people, and just really, just being with them and just offering them whatever I could by way of support. And that could be feeding, could be just holding a hand, it could be just sitting quietly as they were on their last stage of the physical life, and just being with them as they transition. And part of it was as my Buddhist teaching talks about the letting go of suffering is through practice of wisdom and compassion. And so I needed to be much more proactive in both of those paths, in the path of wisdom and the path of compassion. And my hospice work was part of, in a way, fulfilling the compassionate aspect of what I knew would help me release my own sort of suffering, inner suffering, which it did, and that was a big part of why I let go of depression completely and haven't been depressed for 35 years probably. But also I learned Reiki because I wanted to be in a way sort of more proactively help people through the dying process. And when people are in hospice, there's obviously a lot of fear around it about the death and their own mortality, and people get really tense, and then there's struggle breathing, and there's a lot of pain and anxiety. So Reiki was really helpful in helping them to release that, so they could transition more peacefully. That really, in a way, was the start of me working on my path as a healer. My the shamanic training that I was doing with Michael Harner and others in the Bay Area was like I was curious about it. I was like, well, this is fascinating. I can just go off on these amazing journeys and learn certain wisdoms, but I wasn't really doing it anything other than out of curiosity and expanding my Buddhist meditations, as I mentioned earlier. But then, as I worked in hospice, and I had these really intimate connections with just an individual that I'd never met before, but having the deepest conversations, I knew that I wanted to do something more, and so I learned Reiki to help them on that. Yeah, and then maybe started to use my shamanic work as in hospice. And I only ever actually did shamanic journeying twice in hospice. It's a little bit invasive, and it's a bit sort of woo-woo for a lot of the people that were there that didn't understand what I was doing. So I only actually did shamanic journeying twice, and one of the guys, his grandfather had been a shaman in British Guyana, so he understood it.
Well, I know, Alan, that on distant sessions that you can provide a whole spectrum of services, interventions, work with a client. Let's
Mm.
focus for a minute, however, on your new project in Vilcabamba, Ecuador, and how you found this Sacred Valley retreat that you and Diana have established. what it's
Yeah,
about, and how unique it is in its vision and its services.
yeah, yeah, sure. I'd love to. So I had a retreat center in, well, prior to that, I was doing healing work in the Bay Area. I had an office, eventually I had an office in Oakland, and I had a thriving practice in Oakland for several years, and San Francisco prior to that. Uh, but I knew I wanted to do something else. I was leading ayahuasca ceremonies by that point, and it was always the location was always the hardest thing. You know, where can I do this work? And it's sort of underground. You know, it wasn't legal, and so it always had to be underground. So it had to be covert, and finding the location was often the hardest thing. I had a house in in a mission San Francisco. That wasn't an ideal location. So I knew that I wanted also to leave the city. I was done with living in. I'd lived, in cities my whole life up to that point. I wanted to leave. Unfortunately, I also had to end my marriage because it wasn't in alignment with my path, and so I did that, and then I moved away from San Francisco to Mount Shasta, which is a beautiful area of Northern California that has a very powerful portal into the inner world, both the physical, individual inner world and the inner world of Gaia. And so I set up a retreat center there because I wanted to also be able to offer ayahuasca ceremonies in a sort of a permanent location. So I went there and I had a retreat center there for 7 years doing ayahuasca, teaching Reiki, teaching other shamanic processes, and also having individual clients come for just personal healing sessions without the use of ayahuasca. So I did that for 7 years, and I was very happy doing it. I met my now wife Diana up there in Mount Shasta. She was living there, and we actually went to Ecuador on our honeymoon. We chose Ecuador because we actually were looking to do a plant medicine work on our honeymoon. We wanted to do Huachuma, work with Huachuma, and so we found a place in Ecuador that seemed perfect. So we went down to Ecuador to do this plant medicine retreat, which was incredible. And we loved Ecuador. I'd been there, 30 years before, but never really sort of done in the plant medicine uh, work that we did on our honeymoon. And then we went home. We thought, that's great. We went home to the place that we love, Mount Shasta, and we just carried on working. We had a thriving business up there, booked out 3 months in advance, and most of our retreats were full. And life was good. We were happy up there. And then I was about a month after our return, I was walking up the stairs to the bedroom in the house, and a month, and they said, "Alan, Ecuador next year." I just went, "Okay." So I walked into the bedroom and said to Diana, I just received the message, we're moving to Ecuador next year. And Diana, being Diana, said, okay. And so we spent a year. We actually were doing some construction projects on the house because we were expanding. We needed more space, and so we had to get those construction projects finished and clear up all. We had a retreat center, so we had multiples of everything. We had to get rid of all that stuff. We had a very busy year getting the place ready to sell and getting rid of a lot of the extraneous stuff that we wouldn't need. And in the meantime, we actually did the trip down to Ecuador. We thought we'd move to Cuenca, which is the area close to where the retreat was that we'd been on, and we really loved it. But then we met somebody who lived in a little town called Vilcabamba. Said, why don't you come down and check it out? So we did, and we realized that this is the place that we wanted to set up our retreat center. And Vilcabamba means Sacred Valley in Quechua, which was the name of our retreat center in Mount Shasta, Sacred Valley Spiritual Retreat. And so it was a no-brainer that we would move to the Sacred Valley of Ecuador. So we did that 3 years ago, and we were busy. We bought an old horse ranch, and we converted the stable actually to guest housing, and we built a beautiful Maloka round ceremonial building, which is known as the Temple of Light, and we have yeah, we've been busy building it, and we've started receiving guests in the last year.
That's such a beautiful story. Amantani seems to have pure guidance for you, and I know how important in shamanism the spirit of a place is. And certainly, you mentioned the difficulty in finding a good location for your ceremonies. You found a beautiful spot. Could you describe it a little bit more? What the land is like, where
Yeah,
you
yeah,
actually live?
definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, we live on the in the Andes mountain range. So as you can imagine, a lot of heavily sloped land. And when we first went to Vilcabamba, we would go around and look at places that we wanted to live. We were renting an apartment down there, and the taxi drivers down there, the people in the know. And so we'd be driving around with different taxi drivers, and they, more than anything, they'd warn us where not to buy. Don't buy there; it's unstable. Don't buy there; it's unstable. Don't buy by the river; it will flood. You know, and so we were getting educated for 3 months in places where not to buy, and also, you know, because it's in the mountains, a lot of the roads are really sort of windy on dirt roads, and even some of the taxi drivers didn't want to go up there, but we'd look at houses that were for sale, and we even though the views were spectacular, looking down over the valley, we knew that when we were 80, we wouldn't want to be driving that road. And also it'd be hot, you know, it adds a lot of time, you know, going in and out of town. And we just knew we wanted to be on the flat. So we found this horse ranch that had been built by a German couple with a nice sort of small house. We also knew we wanted a 2-bedroom, single-story house, and it had a beautiful two-bedroom, single-story with more land than we'd expected. But it was flat, and it was like one property away from the river, so we knew there was a lot of water there. So the property was perfect. We knew without hesitation this is the place that we wanted. Um, but you know, it's the Sacred Valley, and it's also known as the Valley of Longevity. Vilcabamba is known as the Valley of Longevity. It's considered a blue zone. It's a place where people live, you know, 3 digits quite commonly, and it was also the place we found out that it was the place that the Incas would send their wounded soldiers to recover. So it obviously has a very special energy, similar to Mount Shasta. Actually, it sort of felt like you know, the twin town of Mount Shasta to us. And one of the things that we did is we brought down. We had an apacheta inside a sacred circle of stone that was like the real power center of our property. We had 5 acres in Mount Shasta, in this one area that was incredibly powerful. We actually got married in, which increased that sort of opening of that portal. And we were then guided to create a circle of stones there and call it the Temple of Light. And there was an apacheta, which is like a stone mound or a cairn, that we had special crystals in at the top that was absorbing the energy from Mount Shasta into this sacred portal where we did healing work. And when we went to Vilcabamba, we built a circular building, kind of the same size as that stone circle. And in the center, in the center of the floor, there's like a recess that's covered in glass that we put those same stones in from our apacheta or cairn that was in the Temple of Light. So we're also working again in the Temple of Light. So our Maloka, our ceremonial building, is the Temple of Light, and everything's oriented from south to north. So we're actually looking directly towards Turtle Island and Mount Shasta. So we bring the energy of Mount Shasta into our space down in. So we kind of like combining the energies of South America and North America, and working, because our heart still is very much in Mount Shasta where we are currently, and so we're combining the energies from the two temples of light.
Bringing the condor and the eagle together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk for a time about ayahuasca and your focus on this plant medicine. The vine of the soul is what you and others have termed it. How about approaching this plant medicine in your Vilcabamba retreat center? What would that experience be like?
Yeah. So as you know, I worked a lot with individuals in hospice. I love the intimacy of that. So we incorporate that in Mount Shasta. Well, I had two practices. I had my ayahuasca practice, and I had my hands-on healing practice, which incorporates sort of like a fusion of different skills that both I and Diane have used over the years, including hypnotherapy, Reiki, shamanic healing, energy healing of different types, somatic healing, breath work. So a combination of things that could be all considered under the umbrella of shamanic traditions. And so we can do that without the use of ayahuasca. And so I used to have people come on retreat. It would just be one person. This is before I met Diana, so it'd just be me and one person for several days, and I'd be working very deeply with them. Also, taking them to sacred sites in the area. But then I would do also ayahuasca retreats, and it usually wasn't the same people. So there's one branch of people and the people that come for the individual healing, and other for the ayahuasca, and that worked great. I loved it. People seem to love it and benefit from it. But when we moved to Ecuador, we decided to combine the two, because in Mount Shasta it would just be weekend retreats for ayahuasca, and I can't really incorporate the other work with the ayahuasca retreats because it has to be done individually or with a couple. I also did couples retreats there in Mount Shasta. So when we moved to Vilcabamba, Ecuador, we decided to do longer retreats. So there's 7-night retreats, 8-day retreats, and we offer 3 ayahuasca ceremonies as well as our other work. And to do that, we couldn't do it in groups, as I mentioned before. So we decided that we would actually just focus on an individual for 7 days. So both me and Dinah with one person for 7 nights, 8 days, or one couple. And so that's what we've been doing. And more than anything, well, it's certainly we're passionate about our work and all the other things that we can offer people in an ayahuasca retreat that you just don't get anywhere else. We feel that we want to help people in the deepest possible way that we can, and it also helps them to integrate the ayahuasca experiences. And I've been on, and I know you've been on ayahuasca retreats, but my experience of going, and I'm sort of an adventurer, so I sort of gone deep into the jungle, not knowing where I'm going, just have a name, and staying with a shaman in the house in the jungle in Peru. In that way, I can spend time with the shaman and their family. But a lot of the times, also, when you go on the bigger retreats with 10 people, and often they're organised by Westerners, you see the shaman in the ceremonies, but you don't see them outside the ceremony very much. And so you're not really receiving any sort of deeper wisdom from them or any other sort of healing techniques other than maybe some herbal remedies that they've made for you. Whereas with us, we're with our client 12 hours a day, and with them during meal times, we're with them with the healing work, we're with them in the ayahuasca ceremonies, we're with them taking them for a walk by one of the rivers with our 2 dogs. We're with them a lot, and we build up an incredible depth of connection and intimacy with people that allows them to just really give up any resistance they have to letting go of that conditioned belief that they have. And so we love it, they love it, and we are like their parents at the end of 7 days. And even our last client from Dubai, she was cuddling up to Dinah in bed, after one of the ayahuasca ceremonies. That level of connection is something that's really important to us. And I think my hospice work also has, in a way, been an influence to that. Just sort of recognise the deep level of connection you can have with somebody one-on-one or two-on-one with and even with the couples work, we work with them individually first before we bring them together. We have to kind of know what their triggers are and what their projections are on their partner, and sort of like have some truth-telling exercises with them together. So that's what we do down there. We love it. We're not there to make a lot of money. We've done that in the past with our work, and now it's really about being of the deepest service that we can be, and we're very happy to be doing that.
What a unique opportunity, Alan. How would someone know they're ready for this kind of experience? And another way of putting it is, who would be your ideal client for
Yeah.
this immersion?
Okay. Well, so people find us for a variety of ways. They also find me through this book, Alchemical Ayahuasca, that you mentioned. So people find it on Amazon and they'll read it, and then they might reach out to us, or they'll reach out to us and we recommend that they read the book, so they get a better sense of us. But then we arrange a phone consultation. Sometimes people think that still in Mount Shasta, so we break it to them, oh, we're actually in Ecuador, but we can work with you from the comfort of your living room, or you can come down to Ecuador. But we kind of very quickly recognize whether somebody's ready for it or they're not ready for it. The ones that aren't ready for it, we will suggest that they do at least one healing session with me. So, I call it the anaconda, the first session of 3. And we'll kind of get them ready. But oftentimes after that first session, they actually don't need to come because they've resolved the issue that they were looking to do. And so let me talk a little bit about ayahuasca and the readiness of people. Because I've worked, I was doing big ceremonies around California with 20 plus people. So a lot of people coming through. And, ayahuasca has sort of like a mystique around it. It's kind of, with the Burning Man crowd, it's kind of like a badge of honor. So you've got to do an ayahuasca ceremony at least. Well, you haven't done an ayahuasca ceremony, and so I get people coming through just that are curious, and that's fair enough. They're curious. They want to try it out. They're going to receive some sort of level of healing. And also there's a level of fear around it. This unknown quantity that could rip you apart. There's a lot of fear around it. So people, even if they're curious, they face that fear. They face that, the unknown, the mystery of what it's all about, and the mystique around it, so that they receive some benefit. But I wanted to work with people that are actually really serious about changing their lives, and in a way, the curious people. I don't sort of. I know it sounds terrible. I don't want to waste my time. Daniel doesn't want to waste her time just with the curious. We want, because we're only seeing a very limited number of people. We're only working with one person or a couple. We want to work with people that are really committed. So, in a way, it's pretty clear who's really committed and who's not really committed. So, we don't have everybody that applies to come down to us to actually sit with us yet until they feel more ready. And if they're not sort of 9 or 10 committed, then they're not committed enough. So we have to work with them to get from 7 to 10, and so we can do that before they come down to us.
I do want to recommend your book, Alan.
Okay.
I'm reading it now, and not only does it give an in-depth review of your journey for your own healing and your own um, purposes of finding yourself, your true self, but it gives quite a good primer to the ayahuasca experience
Yeah.
itself,
Hmm.
such as not to have expectations and be open to the experience, have a solid intention, and
Hmm.
the integration aspect that you're talking, how important that is to really
Yeah.
integrate the plant medicine experience. So I highly recommend your book for anyone who's interested in the ayahuasca experience, especially in working with you.
Thank you.
What else do you want to say about what's presented there?
Yeah, I mean the book. It was written to help people. My story is very relatable for a lot of people, and so it was written to help people. It's a book of healing. It not just talks about my journey, and in a way, the level of commitment that is required to change the path of your life if it's not going well. It's got to be a hard, non-negotiable yes if you really are committed to change your life. It's also other thing that Amantane said to me in that first conversation was actions have consequences. If you don't change certain things in your life to support the changes that you're looking for, nothing else is going to change. and so that's also part of the integration work of ayahuasca, is you've got to change aspects of your life that aren't working for you. So this book is very much about that. This is what is required. Don't kid yourself, but it's also teaching about how to set firm boundaries. Like there's one quote I give of Michael Singer, who said, one of the chapters of his book, he says, if you want to give up, stop smoking, stop putting cigarettes in your mouth. And it sounds simple, doesn't it? If you want to stop drinking, stop buying beer, stop pouring a glass of beer. It's got to be a hard no. And so that's what I sort of teach, and it's also from my own experiences. I'm definitely teaching from experience. I said a hard yes and followed through when I first started my hero's journey. And I've been doing that ever since, like a hard yes. I didn't think I'd be leading ayahuasca ceremonies. I never thought that for a moment. But when I had my first ayahuasca experiences in 2005, I was told very clearly, you are a healer. This is the path for the rest of your life. I was at the bedside of somebody that had just died, and I could see his spirit leaving his body, or his life force leaving his body. I wasn't sure what it was. And I just went, something's different, isn't it? And the man said, they said, yes, it is. You're a healer. This is your path for the rest of your life. He only told me that when he knew I was ready to hear it. And I just went, yes. And I haven't wavered from that. It was 2006. I haven't wavered from that for a second. I haven't questioned that for a second, because I know that he knows me very well, and he knows that I would say yes before he even said, this is your path for the rest of your life. So the book is about that. It's about how to really tap into, that part of you, the power that will say a non-negotiable yes. So it's also about setting boundaries, right? Setting clear boundaries with yourself so that you can set clear boundaries with other people. But if you want to give up a habit, it's got to be 10 out of 10 yes. I smoked when I was a teenager. And you hit the joke that, I give up all the time. It's not a problem. I give up all the time. But it's got to be, when I gave up smoking finally, at the age of 27 or something, it was like, I do not smoke. Do you want a cigarette, Al? No, I do not smoke. And it's not I'm giving up. It's I do not smoke. It's very different, right? The really sort of 10 out of 10, I do not do something, or I'm trying not to do something. So the book is about that. It's about really sort of clarifying for yourself what is required, with or without ayahuasca. And I want people to understand what ayahuasca is like and what you might expect from ceremonies, and some of the obstacles that you might face. The level of commitment that is required if you really want to change your life. And the last part is about ways that ayahuasca has taught me that people heal, and how I can help people heal. I can talk to that if you like. So if you sat in an ayahuasca ceremony, which I know you had, there's a peak period. So you drink the ayahuasca maybe around 40 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. You start getting what's known as the peak experience, where it comes up stronger. You start to feel very altered physically. You might have visions, you might see sacred geometry, you might hear voices, you might feel yourself being touched by spirit fingers. But then what happens after a period, maybe that lasts for an hour, and then it starts to come down, because it starts to soften, and then it starts to flatten out. And I noticed that that's the period that the shamans start doing the energy extractions. They come around with their tobacco and their shikapa rattles, and they start hitting you, or the Shipibos often, they'll just stay in the one spot on their cushion, and you go to them. But it happens then. They don't do it during the peak experience. They want you to have that peak experience and face your fears or receive wisdom that you're being given, in hopefully in that experience. So it's a softening out. And I was like, interesting. And so I started exploring that area in my own ceremonies, but also I started doing healing work with my clients at that moment. And what I was shown is that when you start to soften out, you start to expand. You yourself start to soften. The fear of the peak experience, or the intensity of the peak experience, in a way, allows you to soften and just like revel in that softening. It's like, oh, thank God that's over, sort of. And you soften and you expand and you start to receive deeper wisdom, maybe from yourself, or you start to have experiences of things in your life that cause your neurotic attachments to behaviors. But I also was shown that it's the time that that the energy extraction is most powerful. When that softening happens, the shamans, they suck it out, and so I started exploring that myself, and without ayahuasca, and I realized that okay, this is the point. I call it the sweet spot. This is in a way the homeostatic state that your body gets into when it's optimum time for healing and also energy extraction. And I saw that also in the dying process. I saw that there's a inattention that can happen as you're dying, or the person's dying, but at some point the body goes through a physiological shift where it transitions to a state where it's ready to leave the earthly realm, where the spirit is ready to leave the body, but it can't do that with tension. The tension holds on to the spirit energy. And so at some point, I'd often use Reiki to help them get to that point. But when they actually, you see them, the physiological shift, it's like a very noticeable thing where they're out to, and maybe their eyes open and they're looking into the distance, and then they can transition. And it's very similar to that point I'm talking about in the ayahuasca ceremony, or the healing ceremony that I do, where the physiological shift enters that place where a transition is happening, and that transition in the healing ceremony is one where I do the deepest work, where I do the energy extraction work, and it can be done without ayahuasca. And ayahuasca showed me that, and in that softness where the sympathetic nervous system is just like letting go, the body does its own healing. And I've also witnessed this many times. Healing happens like that. So that transitional phase, I call it a transcendent phase, where you transcend in your sort of whole physical and mental, emotional self to the point where you enter the state of healing, and the divine intelligence of the body knows what to do when it's given that landscape to do healing. It knows, and it does it like that. And let's say somebody has cancer, it starts to produce healthy cells from that point, and that might take a few months for you actually to release the cancer fully, but the actual change of course happens like that. So I'm working really strongly with that opportunity, and I'm bolstering, I'm encouraging, I'm in their corner like, woohoo, let's get this done. But you have to get them to that state of what I call the sweet spot. And so that's why the title is Take the Journey from Depression to the Sweet Spot, because in that sweet spot, that's where the deep healing happens. And it's amazing. It's very quick. In shamanic cultures, people didn't have time to just sit around in ICUs. They didn't have them. They had to kind of get on the road really quickly, right? And so it's very clear that in shamanic traditions and cultures, healing happens really quickly. It's not a long, drawn-out process. And so that's the beautiful thing about this ancient wisdom, is that it does happen quickly. And so I encourage people. So I just do three healing sessions that I call the Anaconda, Jaguar, and Condor healing sessions.
So for people, Alan,
That was a lot.
That was perfect, Alan. It's just what I wanted you to speak about. And I know that people can reach you and have a 15-minute consultation to just get to know you, or chart a course.
Yeah.
And for people who are beginning with you and perhaps engage this 3-session process, um, I'm understanding that you can reach the sweet spot even at a distance, and that your work is
exactly.
consistent, whether people are in person with ayahuasca or working with you in a healing modality from far away.
Absolutely. And what I tell people is that healing is the easiest thing that you can do. Yeah, like, what are you talking about? If it was easy, I'd have done it. It's like, no, because you don't know what I'm talking about yet. So then I start the process, and I get into this state really quickly, the sweet spot really quickly. And I say, now do you understand what I'm talking about? And they say, yes, I understand exactly. But I think it's a Yogananda quote. You can talk about sugar all day long, but you don't know what sweet is until you taste it. It's a bit like that. I could talk about I know it's the easiest thing that you can do, and they go, yeah, or okay, well, I believe you, but not really understand it until they've tasted that sugar and recognizing, oh yeah, now I know what you're talking about. And actually, my next book is Life Doesn't Have to Be That Hard. It's really about sort of exploring that, because especially in the US, people really believe that life's meant to be hard. And, that if in ayahuasca ceremonies, I learned this in an ayahuasca experience I had with a beautiful master who now has since died. It was introduced to me by Don Oscar Miro-Quesada. He was his ayahuasca teacher, Don Ignacio Duri, in a little village called Hell in southern Peru, and that aptly named by the Spanish as Infierno. And he sort of kind of showed me in ceremony what a master of ayahuasca does. And the ceremony was the most tranquilo, soft, gentle ceremony that I'd ever had. It wasn't all the fireworks and like lights and flashing show. It was gentle, and it's like, is he awake? What's he doing? And it showed me, ayahuasca doesn't have to be that hard. So if ayahuasca doesn't have to be that hard to receive healing, life doesn't have to be that hard to receive healing. And it kind of transformed my healing practice.
Well, you're true to your word, or at least your t-shirt, Alan, because on your website, you're wearing a shirt that says life doesn't need to be that hard.
Yeah, exactly. I have the
And,
T-shirt, yeah. And
and you
I have a
tell,
fridge magnet. You'll get one when you come down.
okay. To follow the easy path, reading about your journey, I wouldn't say that all parts were easy,
No.
but but I understand you found the easy path. How can we find that path?
How can you find that path? Well, unfortunately, you have to learn through the knocks. The knocks give you the wisdom that is required to to build the inner resources. At some point, you don't need to do that anymore. And some people come to that realization very early in life, and I didn't come to it until my 40s. And my life's goal is to teach people on this spiritual journey. Okay, let's shift your awareness to another state of being, to gain full authority and autonomy over your reactivity. You have that, and you have everything you need already, but it's just being masked by the tense states that cause negative reactivity. And I don't talk about necessarily transformation. I talk about transcendence. You can transcend them by elevating your vibratory frequency to one that is above them, and you can stay in that state just by first of all having the density that causes them in the first place release, the hucha. You have to have that release. You can talk about it all day long, like in therapy, but if you don't have that density that contains in a way the signature of that reactivity, you're going to keep reacting. So that's the critical thing, to have that density release, which shamanic practitioners do, so that you can then not have that frequency pulling you back down all the time, so that you can stay in that transcendent state of peace and love and potential, but also human. You're gonna get knocked, you're gonna react to certain things, certain triggers, but you can get out of it a lot quicker. So you are master of your own destiny. You have full sovereignty over the way you react, and you're not a victim to all that other stuff. So that's what I can help people to do. And it's transformed my life and transformed many hundreds of my clients' lives. And some of the client stories are in my book. And people say, "Wow, that's so easy." Well, like, it's really, if there's a magic pill, I have to say, it's like my focus of all my work is how does people love themselves, like in a really deeply authentic way, that they don't allow the bullshit. They don't allow to be walked all over. They don't allow to be abused. They don't allow to stay in relationships where they're being brought down and pulled down. That's a boundary setting. But if you don't do it from a place of deep personal love and commitment, self-love, you can't love anybody, beyond the level of love that you can receive for yourself. So that's the deep work, and I'd say that's the core of my work. And for whatever reason, a lot of people don't know how to love themselves. And so what I show them is, loving yourself is the easiest thing you can do once you get out of the way, and it's there and it's limitless.
Alan, I know you speak from experience because I know a little bit that you've shared about your journey. And you've been a committed seeker. You offer your work and your knowledge to others to help and support them. Um, what other suggestions, guidance do you have before we need to close? What would you say to people
Yeah,
considering working with you or reaching out to connect?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd love to chat with whoever wants to chat with me. We offer 30-minute free consultations. I recommend you read my book. My book actually has a vibration to it. It's been written in a particular vibration, and so just hold in the paperback. It's also available on Audible. I know you're listening to it, but the paperback has a particular vibration to it that you can just sort of hold it to yourself, and it might sound sort of like highfalutin, but you can receive healing from it. And I believe that the words in the book are all being written to help you towards healing. It's a very easy flow of writing. I can't have an ethos that life doesn't have to be that hard and write a really complex book. It has to be done really simply with a very sort of simple languaging, short sentences, and non-scientific, which most ayahuasca books contain the science of it. No data other than personal client stories. Is my personal stories, and I believe reading the book is like the first part of the journey and reaching out to us, and just as I mentioned, you're going to come down either on your own or with a friend or in a couple ideally. You're going to get the best level of care that you can possibly experience at an ayahuasca retreat. And I think, because I've done research, we're the only retreat center in the world that offers retreats for an individual or a couple, because it's not really financially viable. Um, but we want to change people's lives so that they can go back to their community and sort of ripple out that healing to spread it throughout the world at the deepest level that we hope that they can do.
I want to thank you then, Alan, for being here with us today, for expressing words about your journey, your passion, the
Yeah,
medicine that you and Diana offer to the world. I'm influenced by your commitment to the hard yes of
yeah,
taking the hero's journey. And
yeah,
I like the audible version because I can hear your
yeah,
voice. You
yeah,
narrate your own story.
yeah,
So to me, that's
yeah.
a bonus. Uh,
Yeah.
but I
Recorded. It was recorded in a storage shed on my property.
well, it seemed like I'm in your company, so I recommend either way of accessing
Yeah.
this volume, and
Thank you. Appreciate it.
it speaks about the journey, as I've said, and
Mm,
about ayahuasca.
yeah.
Each one of those are worth the exploration,
Thank you.
and I know at the bottom line that following depression, you are willing to change your life,
Yeah.
and you did whatever it took to do this.
Yeah.
And you chose an extraordinary life, you've
Mm,
said, of travel, curiosity,
yeah.
adventure,
Yeah.
and I would add to that of service. And that's what I know most strongly today, Alan. is you bringing your experience and bringing your capabilities to service,
Yeah,
and through the many ways you offer it.
yeah.
So I want to thank you once again. Any
Thank you
final
so
words?
much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to speak to something you mentioned about living an exceptional life. I do believe I live an exceptional life. And one of the things I speak to my clients about is that when you don't have these conditions that hold you back, you can't just go back to the mundane. How are you going to excel? You know, what are you going to do to sort of like change the world, you know, to live an exceptional life? Don't just live a life without these conditions. You know, do something like major with it to be of service, because being of service is the most transformative, you know, practice that you can offer to remain in this like state of deep healing and, you know, transcendence. And so I talk about that, and so that's it. You know, live an exceptional life.
Alan, you're an exceptional person, exceptional shaman. I want to thank
Thank
you
you.
for being part of
Appreciate it.
the global community of Shamans Directory.
Yeah.
Anything you want to
Thank you.
reflect back on what uh, the global shamanic community means to you through Shamans Directory?
I use the word shaman, and people call me shaman, and I don't sort of go, no, don't call me that, because shaman to them has power. They don't necessarily know what it means, and they might be misusing it according to what Nick Breeze-Woods is teaching, but it has power, and so it builds confidence and trust in the person they're using it towards. So if people want to call me shaman, please go ahead and do that, because they elevate me to a point that they trust and have faith in that I can offer them something that maybe nobody else has been able to offer them, and that has a real power in their own healing process. You know, the trust and the sort of the perceived expectation of what they can receive from it. So, you know, in terms of the Shamans Directory, I don't think everybody needs to be on there according to what is the traditional understanding of what shamanism is, because it is a technology, a spiritual technology that develops and shifts and changes. And ultimately, we just want to help people, right? And it doesn't matter what you call yourself, but if somebody calls you something that is going to help them to heal, then go right ahead and call it, you know, and more power to them for it.
Thank you, Alan. To everyone watching, thank you for joining us for this Shaman to Shaman conversation. This is how we grow as a global community, by listening, by learning, by sharing. To learn more about Alan Waugh, visit shamansdirectory.com. You'll also find additional interviews, summit presentations, and replays of our live events on our YouTube channel. Until next time, this is Wake. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Wake. I really appreciate it. It's been a real pleasure and honor to chat with you.
For me as well, Alan. We'll see you around the fire, and thank you for taking your part in this growing shamanic community. Thank you.